In the rugged heartland of Montana under a thunderous storm, a struggling rancher named Lucas Hayes unknowingly gives shelter to a mysterious traveler, a beautiful woman hiding an explosive secret. Ariana Lee isn't just any visitor. She's a billionaire tech mogul who vanished from her Silicon Valley empire to find authenticity in rural America. But when hidden truths collide with pride, betrayal threatens not only Lucas's family legacy, but their chance at love. It's a gripping tale of deception, redemption, and courage, where an American farmer's grit meets Wall Street power head-on. If you've ever faced impossible odds or fought hard to protect what matters most, you won't want to miss this dramatic story. Subscribe now to support stories that celebrate real American values, ranch life, and the strength that binds us together. The ending might just surprise you. A deep orange glow stretched across the late afternoon sky in southwestern Montana, illuminating the fields of the Hayes family farm. Lucas Hayes stood in the center aisle of his old barn, the wooden boards weathered by decades of hard work and erratic weather. He trailed a calloused hand along the flank of Duchess, a sleek, dark bay mare who now represented the last remaining lifeline of his family's once thriving land. Rows of empty stalls attested to the harsh realities of plummeting grain prices and persistent droughts. At 32, Lucas found himself in an unthinkable position, contemplating the sale of Duchess, the single valuable asset he had left. The mere idea of letting her go threatened to tear apart what little pride he clung to, but the mounting debts and an ever-looming bank deadline demanded that he face some harsh truths. He took off his dusty hat and ran a hand through his short auburn hair. His grandfather had built this barn with the help of neighbors during an era when people pooled strength and resources more generously. Now Lucas felt like he was swimming against a relentless current. The memory of his father, Robert Hayes, weighed on his mind. Robert's earnest grin and the way he talked about the Hayes farm with unabashed reverence. "This land is in our blood," his father used to say, "and as long as we keep it in the family, we'll have each other." It was more than a sentimental notion. It was an identity. Seeing it slip away now felt like a betrayal of those who had come before him. Then just as dusk spread across the horizon, a silhouette appeared at the barn door. At first, Lucas tensed, wondering if it was the banker or some other unwelcome visitor, bearing more demands for payments he could not possibly meet. Instead, out of the gathering darkness stepped a stranger, a woman whose hair and jacket dripped with rain from the sudden storm that had come roaring in over the hills. Dark clouds still lurked outside, threatening heavier rains. So the newcomer's arrival seemed both desperate and oddly fated. Something in her posture, an odd mix of resolve and weariness, made him drop his initial defensiveness. She introduced herself as Ariana Lee, her voice tinged with exhaustion. She asked for a place to dry off and, more unexpectedly, a horse to borrow for a short journey. The request took him aback, but Lucas had been raised to lend a helping hand to those who needed it. What he didn't realize, of course, was that Ariana wasn't just any traveler caught in the elements. She was, in fact, a brilliant tech entrepreneur, from California heiress to a $40 billion empire she had built alongside her late father's dream of connecting the world through cutting-edge apps and innovations. Where to boardrooms and soulless corporate deals, she had flown to Montana under an assumed name, chasing a sense of authenticity she believed her wealth had robbed her of. Offering Ariana a place to stay was a small gesture of basic humanity, one Lucas carried out without a second thought. Yet the very act would set in motion a sequence of events neither of them could have predicted. Lucas guided her toward the small guest house on the edge of the property, a ramshackle cabin hardly fit for fancy visitors. By the flickering lantern light, she thanked him, and he mumbled something about returning to the barn. His mind spun with conflicting feelings, curiosity, caution, and strangely enough, the first glimmer of hope he had felt in a long time. Earlier that same week, Ariana Lee had been standing in the expansive living room of her penthouse apartment in San Francisco. The windows wrapped around the top-floor suite, offering breathtaking views of the Bay Area's glittering skyline, an empire of glass towers and bright lights. Dressed in designer clothes that felt like a uniform of success, she scrolled through the incessant barrage of headlines that seemed to trap her in an echo chamber of her own achievements. Tech prodigy Ariana Lee poised for historic merger and Laz Venture, a $40 billion innovation machine. Each headline reminded her of how far she'd come since launching her first startup at 20, but it also reminded her of how soul-crushingly tired she was. Her assistant, Kathy, had left her a color-coded schedule for the next 3 weeks, filled with board meetings, press interviews, and personal obligations, which included a high-profile charity event. Ariana's eyes flicked to the photos lining her mantle. A framed magazine cover displayed her poised in a meticulously tailored suit, her expression confident yet approachable, an image carefully crafted by her public relations team. Nearby was another picture, one of her father Whaley smiling as he held up a plaque from the company's early days. She had been 16 then, brimming with excitement about every new piece of technology they developed. That picture was from a time before success morphed into something more akin to suffocation. With a few determined clicks on her computer, Ariana arranged a 2-week hiatus. She used an old alias, her mother's maiden name, to book a last-minute flight to Montana and wired a modest amount of money into a separate account, ensuring she could travel without tipping off the paparazzi or her board of directors. Her phone, which never stopped ringing, buzzed with messages from her CFO, urging her to finalize the merger. She silenced it, slipped it into a drawer, and took out a basic flip phone she had purchased discreetly weeks earlier. Her final act was to lock her penthouse's doors and leave her usual life behind, if only temporarily. The plan was simple. She would find a quiet spot in the Montana countryside away from reporters and speculation. Ariana yearned to see if there was more to life than graphs and acquisitions. The twist came almost immediately when she found herself caught in a storm on a remote country road. Her rental car's wipers fought valiantly against the lashing rain, but the mud-slicked path forced her to seek shelter. That was when she spotted the faint glow of a farmhouse and barn in the distance. By the time she trudged through the downpour and knocked on the door, her designer boots were caked with mud and her hair hung in wet tangles around her face. In a swirl of relief and apprehension, Ariana realized she was about to throw herself on the mercy of a stranger, hoping her old alias would hold, and that nobody would connect Ariana Lee to the missing billionaire the press would soon be hunting for. The door to the barn had opened, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with inquisitive eyes the color of moss. His kindness felt disarming from the start. Rather than questioning her motives, he'd simply stepped aside to let her in. That single act of empathy was more impactful than any business deal she had ever made. Back in the present, as Ariana nestled into the rough but cozy guest house, Lucas provided she felt a deeper comfort than she had felt in months, or maybe even years. She resolved to keep her real identity under wraps as long as possible, but she also knew secrets have a way of unraveling. All she wanted, however, was to exist in this simpler world, one built on tangible effort and a sense of shared community, and decide for herself whether her empire was truly worth returning to. The next morning arrived in a hush with pale beams of sunlight cutting through the lingering clouds. Ariana woke to the gentle chorus of farm life, lowing cattle, clucking hens, and the distant whinny of a horse. It was a symphony she had never experienced in the heart of San Francisco. She slipped out of the lumpy cot, changed into yesterday's jeans and jacket, now dry but still speckled with mud, and stepped outside. Her breath caught at the panorama rolling hills, touched by early light, dew glistening on grass that stretched toward the horizon. She found Lucas in the barn, busy with a routine she would learn came naturally to farmers. He was mucking out stalls, a pitchfork in his hands, the motion rhythmic and unhurried. At her entrance, he gave her a curt nod that didn't feel unfriendly. "Just focus, morning," he said simply, leaning on the pitchfork. "Hope the cabin was comfortable enough." "It was fine," Ariana replied, her eyes flicking to Duchess. The mare's coat gleamed and the animal nickered softly. "Thank you, by the way. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't let me stay." Lucas shrugged. "That's how things go around here. Neighbors help neighbors or strangers when needed." His voice was tinged with quiet pride in that custom. He turned his attention to a bucket of oats he was measuring for the few remaining horses. Ariana could sense the tension beneath his calm demeanor. Once or twice he glanced at her as if trying to reconcile her city-dweller appearance with his impulse to be hospitable. She offered to help, though she had no idea how to do farm work. He handed her a broom, pointing toward a dusty corner of the barn. "Start by sweeping," he said, not unkindly. Ariana accepted the handle, blinking at the immediate dust cloud that rose with each stroke. It was humbling, but also oddly satisfying. Her father had built entire software frameworks from the ground up. Yet she, his prodigy, daughter, was struggling to clean a barn floor. Within the hour, she'd worked up a sweat, and Lucas had softened enough to give her a half-smile when she awkwardly tried to maneuver the wheelbarrow. She noticed him occasionally checking his phone, a cheap flip model, like the one she carried, though, for very different reasons. At one point, she caught the pained look on his face as he read something off the screen. A bank notice she suspected concern for him rose unbidden in her chest. Once Ariana had finished sweeping, Lucas stepped outside and she followed. The morning sun cast the farm's battered structures in a warm glow. She noticed a rusted tractor idling by a fence missing a tire. An old sign that read Hayes Family Farm S 1924 hung crookedly by the front gate. It struck her how proud that sign must have been decades ago, back when the farm was fully operational. Now it looked more like a relic clinging to a story of better days. Ariana looked at Lucas and asked quietly, "How bad is it?" He hesitated, lips pressed tight. "I'm not going to pretend everything's okay," he finally said. "The bank's breathing down my neck. I have a month, maybe two, before they move to foreclose, but I'll figure something out." Her first instinct was to blurt out that she could help. She had enough money in one account to buy this entire plot a dozen times over. But she bit her tongue. She wasn't that Ariana, not here, not yet. So she just nodded, matching his resolute gaze. "If there's anything I can do," Lucas almost cracked a wry grin, "we'll start with you learning not to tip over the wheelbarrow. Maybe I'll think of more advanced tasks for you later." Later that day, Ariana was introduced to Lucas's younger sister, Nicole Hayes. Nicole arrived in a beaten-up pickup truck that rattled to a stop in the farmyard, a swirl of dust trailing behind it. She hopped out wearing cowboy boots and a denim jacket, her dark hair twisted into a no-nonsense braid. From the passenger seat, she grabbed a grocery bag and two steaming cups of coffee from the local diner. "So you're the traveler," Nicole said, looking Ariana up and down. There was no malice in her tone, just straightforward curiosity. "Name's Nicole, brought some coffee for Lucas. And for you if you want it, thank you." "I'm Ariana," she said, grateful for the caffeine. Nicole's handshake was firm, and Ariana sensed a familial bond, just as unbreakable as the farm's old fence lines. They headed to the porch where Ariana noticed how the paint on the farmhouse was chipped and peeling, a testament to years of neglect the family couldn't afford to remedy. Inside, she could see dusty photo frames on a side table, snapshots of Robert Hayes in happier times. Lucas and Nicole at various ages of the farm, in an earlier state of prosperity. She felt an odd pang of nostalgia for a past that wasn't even hers. Nicole set her coffee down and turned to Lucas. "We need to talk about the letter from the bank, big brother. They're accelerating the deadlines again. You can't just ignore them." Lucas's jaw tightened. "I'm not ignoring them. I'm trying to handle it my way." Which is what exactly? Patching leaks on an ancient irrigation system with duct tape. Nicole's tone was sharp but carried genuine concern. Her eyes flicked to Ariana, then back to Lucas. "You don't have to pretend things aren't dire, you know? We're allowed to be worried." Ariana hovered in the doorway, uncertain whether she should leave them to discuss private matters, but Nicole turned and gestured for her to sit, as if to say, "We don't mind you hearing this." She settled in a wooden chair, noticing that even the chairs bore signs of use and age. "I'm not selling," Lucas insisted. "Not to Wendell. Investments, not to any developer. This farm has been in our family for nearly 100 years. I'm not going to let it go without a fight." Nicole shot Ariana a glance that seemed to say, "See what I'm dealing with." But Ariana just sipped her coffee quietly. She understood pride. She also understood being cornered by life. Ariana decided to break the tension by sharing a bit of her background, at least a sanitized version. She mentioned having some experience in administrative work, trying to sound helpful but not too eager. "I know a bit about paperwork and budgeting," she offered. "Maybe I could help you look over whatever the bank sent." Lucas and Nicole exchanged a look. After a pause, Lucas nodded reluctantly. "I won't say no to a fresh pair of eyes." The conversation shifted as they dove into the details of the bank letters. Ariana recognized the tactics all too well. Short deadlines, complicated interest hikes, and the push for a quick sale. It was a classic scenario in which developers would swoop in and buy the land cheaply once the farm went under, repurposing it into high-priced estates or a resort. Ariana felt her stomach churn. "I could fix this," she thought. "But if I do, I'll lose the one thing I came here for, some semblance of normalcy." She resolved to help quietly. If a solution existed that didn't require revealing the deep coffers at her disposal, she would try to find it. Over the next several days, Ariana found herself embraced by the rhythms and demands of daily farm life. She rose with the dawn earlier than she ever had for a corporate meeting and followed Lucas around as he showed her how to feed the chickens, gather eggs, and keep track of how much each cow was consuming. At first, she tripped over her own feet, stumbling through tasks like cleaning the barn. But soon her body adapted and she discovered a surprising sense of accomplishment in every chore completed. The local community also played its part in teaching her what rural life was like. Old Mr. Anderson, who owned the neighboring ranch, dropped by with extra feed he'd bought at a discount. He refused to take any money, telling Lucas, "Your dad helped me when I was in a rough spot." just repaying the favor. Ariana watched the exchange with fascination, recalling how in her world no favor came without an invoice or a negotiation. Meanwhile, Nicole approached Ariana about ways they could possibly sell some of the farm's produce at a higher profit. We've mostly sold locally, Nicole admitted, but the big city is just a few hours away. Maybe we could try an urban farmer's market. It's a bit more high-end, but people there pay a premium for organic produce. Ariana latched onto the idea. In her past life, she had seen how social media and certain niche platforms could drive demand for fresh, locally sourced goods. After all, plenty of upscale restaurants in San Francisco bragged about their farm-to-table approach, charging top dollar for ingredients that came with a good backstory. We could develop a brand for Hayes Farm, she suggested, carefully omitting her advanced marketing know-how. Make a simple website or even just a social media page to let people know what you offer. People love the idea of direct access to a real farm. Lucas was skeptical, but Nicole found the idea exciting. We can give it a shot. If it fails, we're no worse off. In between these budding plans, Ariana couldn't ignore the increasing tension between Lucas and the bank. Every day a new letter or phone call arrived, each one more urgent than the last. Lucas didn't bring it up much, but the tightness in his shoulders spoke volumes. Ariana wondered if she should intervene, but each time she thought about it, she remembered his earlier words, "I'm not selling, not without a fight." If she swooped in with a near miraculous bailout, would he feel betrayed by her financial power? She suspected he would because it would confirm that she wasn't the simple wanderer he believed she was. Adding to this swirl of emotions was the growing attraction between the two of them. It began subtly in lingering glances, in the small shared victories. Like the day they fixed a fence line together, Ariana holding the wire while Lucas hammered it into place. They laughed when she missed the post and hammered her thumb instead. He paused to hold her hand gently, checking if she was hurt. The concern in his eyes sparked a warmth in Ariana's chest she hadn't felt in years, if ever. She could sense Lucas wrestling with something too drawn to her, but aware that she might have secrets. He'd catch her in the barn typing furiously on that cheap phone of hers, a clouded look on her face. When he asked if everything was all right, she'd simply say it was a text from someone back in the city, and he wouldn't press further. But the tension of unspoken truth stretched between them. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, the corporate world roiled with Ariana's unexplained absence. At Lee Innovations, her multi-billion-dollar enterprise executives scrambled to contain the fallout. The proposed merger that Ariana had put on hold was in jeopardy, and the shareholders were not pleased. Speculation ran rampant in financial papers. Has Ariana Lai abandoned her own company? Mystery surrounds tech CEO's vanishing act. The CFO, Damon Blake, tried to placate the board, explaining that Ariana had personal matters to attend to and would return soon. But weeks passed without any solid update. Kathy, Ariana's assistant, was inundated with calls from journalists and potential investors. She had no answers to give. Ariana had left behind only a single directive: do not finalize anything until I return. It wasn't enough for the business-savvy vultures on Wall Street who saw an opportunity to shake investor confidence and potentially force a hostile takeover. Yet Ariana's controlling shares remained a steadfast barrier to any corporate coup. In truth, Ariana still kept tabs on her empire, though, in a limited and clandestine fashion. Late at night, once Lucas and Nicole had gone to bed, she would slip into the guest cabin's tiny kitchenette to power on an older laptop. Through a secure server, she'd check in with Damon, relaying coded instructions. She maintained a delicate balance. Too much oversight might signal she was still in full corporate mode, but too little might allow the board to sign the merger behind her back. Yet every time she considered returning to the city to quell the turmoil, she recalled the sense of emptiness she felt in that world. Here on the Hayes farm, she was forging a different kind of bond with the land, with the animals, and with a man whose quiet determination was the polar opposite of the cutthroat ambition she'd known for so long. She wasn't ready to give that up. Not just yet. One evening, as Ariana was closing her laptop, she found a small note from Damon. "Investors are getting antsy. We need a sign you're still in control." She shook her head, exhaustion pressing in. That same night, she walked outside to the porch of the guest cabin and stared at the unpolluted sky. The stars were overwhelming diamonds against velvet, a sight she never experienced in the city. The farm glowed faintly under moonlight, and out by the paddock, she saw the silhouette of Lucas moving around, likely checking on Duchess. Without hesitation, Ariana headed out. The grass, still wet with evening dew, soaked the cuffs of her pants, but she didn't care. She found him leaning on a fence post, gazing at the horizon. Couldn't sleep, she asked softly. He looked startled at first, then relaxed. Could say the same about you. Ariana joined him by the fence. Crickets chirped, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of hay. She wondered how anyone could not fall in love with the serenity of this place, even if it came with back-breaking work and relentless bills. Lucas's broad shoulders sagged slightly under the weight of so many struggles. She found herself wanting more than anything to lift some of that burden from him. Thank you, she said, surprising even herself for what he asked, brow furrowing, for letting me stay here, for teaching me. Well, everything about farm life I know. I'm not always the easiest person. She didn't elaborate on the heavy secrets she carried. It means a lot. Lucas turned to face her fully, the moonlight catching the warmth in his eyes. You earned your keep. You've been more help than I'd have thought. And Ariana, he paused, hesitant. I appreciate the company. It's been a while since I had someone around who wasn't telling me to sell or just giving me pity. You're different. Ariana felt her chest tighten in an unfamiliar flutter. She began, but the words stuck in her throat. She didn't want to ruin the moment by lying or telling half-truths. Instead, she let the silence remain a peaceful space between them. A few days later, Ariana joined the Hayes siblings at the local farmers market, a Saturday tradition in the nearby small town. They arrived early to claim a spot for a modest stand displaying fresh eggs, potatoes, and squash from the Hayes farm. It wasn't much, but Ariana recognized an opportunity for growth. She observed other stands with professionally designed signs offering jam samples or handcrafted cheeses and realized how marketing could make all the difference. Nicole chatted amiably with neighbors, sharing stories about the farm and how the fields were coming along now that the rains had slightly improved. Lucas kept an eye on the produce, organizing the small supply in neat rows. Ariana watched as local residents approached them with sympathetic smiles. Your father's legacy was something special, an older woman remarked as she picked up a head of lettuce. Robert was a good man. Hope y'all can hold on to that land. Lucas nodded, thanking her. When the woman insisted on paying more than the listed price, Ariana understood how deeply this community cared about the farm. It wasn't just a swath of land on a map, it was woven into the history of everyone who lived there. The realization hit Ariana hard. If the farm was lost, it would hurt more than just Lucas and Nicole. A man, wearing a battered hat, ambled over. I heard the bank's leaning on you, Lucas, he said in a low tone. If there's anything me and the boys can do, we're here. The sincerity made Lucas's jaw clench. Ariana could see he hated accepting charity, yet at the same time he couldn't bring himself to scorn the offer. After the man departed, Lucas turned to Ariana. This place runs on goodwill as much as hard work, he said, tucking his hands in his pockets. It's hard when everyone knows your struggles, though. Pride takes a hit, Ariana softened her voice. I get that, she replied, even though her experiences with pride usually involve corporate deals and public image. But sometimes you have to let people help. He eyed her pensively. Is that why you're here, because you needed help with something? The question caught her off guard. Maybe, she said, or maybe I just needed to get away. Before he could pry further, an announcement crackled through the loudspeakers, drawing people toward a small stage near the market center. The town's mayor, wearing a ribbon-bedecked sash, introduced a local fundraiser for renovating the community center. As Ariana listened, an idea took shape. She had the knowledge and the resources, albeit hidden, to do so much more for this town. Yet she had come here for authenticity, not to play the night with bottomless funds. Still, she realized she might not have a choice if she truly wanted to help Lucas and the town. That night, after they'd sold out most of their produce and headed back, Ariana waited until the Hayes siblings had turned in. Then she discreetly stepped outside, phone in hand. Standing behind the barn, she called Damon, her CFO. She spoke in guarded terms, instructing him to set up a shell corporation focusing on rural development. She would funnel funds for grants or sustainable farming initiatives, small enough not to raise immediate alarms, but large enough to help the Hayes farm stave off the bank. Damon, initially stunned to hear from her directly after so long, eventually complied. Ariana could sense his relief that she was taking some action. Once she hung up, she stared at the barn, the old paint chipped and the doors sagging. She felt a pang of guilt. She was manipulating the system in secret, even if her intentions were pure. Was it better to come clean? Or would that only sow distrust? She pictured Lucas's eyes darkening with betrayal if he learned she had orchestrated a mysterious financial lifeline from the shadows. But she also knew time was running out. She vowed to reveal the truth once the farm was safe, if he'd still want anything to do with her then. Within a week, subtle changes began to appear at the Hayes farm. The grant for sustainable agriculture came through more swiftly than anyone expected. Lucas and Nicole assumed it was a stroke of luck, though Ariana felt a surge of mingled relief and anxiety. They had the funds to upgrade sections of the irrigation system, and Ariana guided them through the cumbersome paperwork. If Nicole was suspicious of how easily Ariana navigated the bureaucratic forms, she didn't show it. "I'm just organized," Ariana explained, once trying to dismiss Nicole's mild curiosity. "I had an administrative job in the city." Remember, Nicole shrugged, accepting it with a slight smile, but Ariana sensed she was being watched more closely now. One afternoon, a representative from a private agricultural development group arrived to assess the land for further funding. The man, clad in a crisp suit that seemed out of place, introduced himself as Mr. Finch. Ariana recognized him as one of Damon's associates. She slipped away to avoid an awkward confrontation, feeling her heart thump dangerously as Oshim heard Finch and Lucas discussing the future potential of the farm. From the crest of a nearby hill, she could see Finch gesturing toward an old well, speaking animatedly about the potential for new technology and expansions. When Finch finally left, Ariana returned to find Lucas and Nicole in the barn, staring at an official-looking folder of documents. "This group wants to offer a match for the grant we just received," Nicole said, stunned. "They're impressed by our vision for sustainable farming." "I didn't think those suits in big cities even knew we existed." Lucas scowled a bit, clearly conflicted. "I'm thankful for the help, but it's also weird how quickly all this is happening. Feels too good to be true." Ariana's heart pounded. She steadied herself, forcing a casual air. "You've been putting in the work, upgrading the irrigation, exploring new markets. It's not surprising someone took notice. Maybe it's just good timing." Lucas eyed her. For a moment, she thought he would see straight through her, but then he exhaled a frustrated breath. "We do need every bit of help we can get. The bank isn't going to wait forever." He slammed the folder shut, set it aside, and then abruptly shifted the conversation. "We'll talk about it later. We've got a fence down in the north pasture." Ariana couldn't help but notice Nicole's gaze lingering on her. The younger Hayes sibling was sharp. Ariana sensed that Nicole was beginning to connect some dots. But what could Ariana say? "Yes, I orchestrated this entire thing because I'm actually a billionaire CEO who ran away from her own empire." The confession would not only shock them, but could also feel like a betrayal of trust. That evening, Ariana found herself in the farmhouse kitchen trying to help Nicole with dinner preparations. The worn countertops were cluttered with recipes and cooking utensils. As Nicole chopped carrots, she spoke casually, though her tone carried an undercurrent of seriousness. "You've adapted to this life fast. Most people can't handle the early mornings and the manual labor. You're pretty comfortable in it now." Ariana forced a chuckle. "I'm still learning. Every day something humbles me, like chasing chickens or figuring out the tractor." Nicole gave a measured nod. "Still, you're a quick study, and you seem to know your way around financial documents, too. Usually that's not a skill you pick up from basic administrative work." A cool bead of sweat trickled down Ariana's spine. "I had a good boss," she lied, hoping to drop the subject. But Nicole wasn't letting go that easily. "Lucas trusts you, you know," Nicole said, eyes fixed on the carrots. "He might not say it, but he respects how you've helped around here. And I'm grateful too, but—" She paused, turning to face Ariana. "I just want to make sure he doesn't get hurt." Ariana felt the weight of those words. She swallowed hard. "I don't want him hurt either," she whispered, knowing it was the one pure truth she could offer. As summer's warmth edged into the crispness of early autumn, the region prepared for its annual harvest fair. The small town a few miles from Hayes Farm transformed into a spectacle of hayrides, pie contests, and live music performed by local bands. Lucas planned to bring produce from the farm's revitalized fields, showcasing the new organic certification they had managed to secure thanks again to Ariana's behind-the-scenes string pulling. On the day of the fair, Ariana rode in the pickup alongside Lucas, the bed loaded with crates of tomatoes, pumpkins, and fresh corn. Her heart swelled with pride at the vibrant produce, a tangible sign of how far the farm had come in mere weeks. She glanced at Lucas, who drove with a determined expression, occasionally tapping his fingers to the beat of a country song on the radio. Upon arriving, they set up under a striped canopy, displaying the Hayes Farm banner. A trickle of curious fairgoers soon turned into a steady stream. Ariana marveled at the local spirit kids in cowboy hats ran around their parents, sipping on cider, and couples browsed handmade crafts. Nicole joined them later, having run an errand to pick up more jugs of fresh apple juice from a nearby orchard. As the day wore on, Ariana helped with sales using a friendly smile and quick banter to attract customers. The produce almost sold itself, The tomatoes were plump and glossy, the sweet corn so fresh people lined up just to get a dozen ears. Lucas was no sales expert, but he was sincere explaining the joys and challenges of farm work. To anyone who asked, Ariana could see how his earnestness appealed to folks tired of the flashy marketing of big box stores. Yet a momentary chill ran through Ariana when she caught sight of a local news crew filming the festivities. An anxious flutter gripped her stomach. She half expected the camera to swivel and some sharp-eyed journalist to recognize her face. Instead, they interviewed the mayor, then panned across the fair's events before moving on. Ariana exhaled. In the early afternoon, a small band struck up a folk tune at the fair's makeshift stage. Couples began dancing on a patch of grass near the stands. Ariana watched from the corner of her eye, longing to join the easygoing fun. She was startled when Lucas nudged her gently. "You've been on your feet all day," he said. "Take a break. Go enjoy the fair a bit." Reluctant to abandon him, she hesitated. "Are you sure you can handle the crowd alone?" He nodded. "Nicole's here too. We can hold down the fort," with a shy grin. Ariana wandered toward the stage area. She found herself tapping her foot to the lively fiddle. For a few minutes, she stood at the edge of the makeshift dance floor, content just to watch. Then unexpectedly, Lucas appeared at her side. "Mind if I steal a dance?" he asked, extending a hand. An embarrassed laugh escaped her lips. "I'm not much of a dancer." He shrugged, eyes warm. "I'm not a pro either, but this is one of the perks of the harvest. Fair might as well enjoy it." Hand in hand, they joined the swirling couples. The music was upbeat, and Lucas spun her awkwardly at first, then with more confidence. Ariana felt herself relax into his lead, the sun shining on her face, the grass beneath her shoes, and Lucas's laughter in her ear. In that moment, the weight of her secret identity slipped away, replaced by a profound sense of belonging. As afternoon light softened into gold, Ariana and Lucas took a walk along the edge of the fairgrounds. String lights were beginning to glow around vendor tents, the enticing smell of caramel apples and kettle, corn drifting in the air. Clusters of people in flannel shirts and boots ambled about celebrating the harvest season as if it were the most important event in the world, and perhaps it was in this little corner of Montana. They reached a quieter stretch behind the fair, near a winding creek where the music faded into a backdrop of crickets and gentle water flow. Ariana felt every sense heighten, the warmth of Lucas's palm against hers, the softness of the autumn breeze on her cheeks. When they finally stopped, he turned to face her, green eyes full of sincerity. "I don't know how long you plan to stay," he began, his voice low, "but these past weeks they've meant something." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "You've been here for the farm for me and Nicole. You've worked harder than most city folks I've met. But more than that, you brought hope at a time I was nearly out of it." Ariana's heart thudded in her chest. Her mind flashed with images of her life back in San Francisco, the swirling chaos of board meetings, profit charts, and constant pressure. Compared to this hush of evening calm, that world felt almost unreal. "I'm not sure I've done anything special," she said softly, "but I do care about this place. And you." His grip on her hand tightened slightly, and Ariana felt the electric pull between them. She nearly forgot to breathe when he leaned in, his gaze flicking down to her lips. The moment hung suspended until a sudden burst of laughter from a nearby group of teens shattered the hush. They jumped apart awkwardly, laughing at themselves. But the unspoken understanding remained like a promise in the air. On the ride back to Hayes Farm, they were both quieter than usual. Nicole in the back seat of the pickup dozed off after a long day of sales. Ariana stayed awake, watching the moonlit landscape pass by the truck's headlights, casting fleeting shadows across fence posts and hay bales. She remembered the words that almost passed between her and Lucas. It thrilled and terrified her to think about how close she'd come to revealing her feelings. Yet she couldn't forget the tangled web of secrets she carried. She was in contact with Damon, pulling corporate levers from behind a curtain to ensure the farm's survival. Every time Lucas said thank you for what he believed was random fortune or diligent networking, Ariana's guilt amplified. Would he still feel the same about her if he knew the truth, that the funds for the farm's revival were partially her own money funneled through fake channels? By the time they reached home, Nicole had groggily waved goodnight and headed into the farmhouse. Lucas parked, then walked Ariana to the guest cabin. He lingered at the threshold, wrestling with the same tension she felt. "Night," he said, eventually, voice rough. "Night," Ariana echoed, catching the flicker of longing in his eyes that mirrored her own. As he walked away, she pushed open the cabin's door, her heart brimming with a mix of joy and dread. The more she fell for Lucas, the more she recognized the cost of her deception. 2 nights later, a storm rumbled in from the west, one of those fast-moving tempests that Montana weather was notorious for. Dark clouds blotted out the moon, and lightning revealed the silhouettes of distant mountains like a strobe. Ariana woke to the crash of thunder and the frantic whinny of Duchess in the barn. She threw on jeans and boots, not bothering with a jacket, and rushed outside. The howling wind nearly knocked her off her feet. She found Lucas by the barn entrance, lantern in hand. Rain pelted them in horizontal sheets, and the old barn doors banged loudly in the gale. "We need to secure the animals," he shouted above the wind. "Cattle are in the lower pasture. If the creek overflows, they'll be trapped together." Hurried into the barn, grabbing ropes, halters, and whatever else might help, herd the frightened livestock. Ariana's heart pounded, adrenaline spiking. She'd never done anything like this before, but the urgency of the situation propelled her. Outside the lower pasture was a slick of mud and water. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the terrified cattle, huddling near a fence line that threatened to give way under the force of a swelling creek. Lucas waded into the fray, calling to the animals, trying to guide them to higher ground. Ariana followed, splashing through water up to her shins. She helped steer the cows by waving her arms and shouting, forging a makeshift funnel that channeled them uphill. Just when it seemed they might save the herd, a rotted fence post collapsed, letting water surge in. Ariana slipped, tumbling into the mud. She gasped for air. Hair plastered to her face and felt strong hands haul her upright. Lucas barked, "You okay?" Coughing, she nodded, "I'm fine." The next half hour was a whirl of cold rain, terrified animals, and heaving effort. Finally, they managed to get the cattle to a dry patch of pasture. Both of them were soaked through, chest heaving with exertion. The storm still raged, but at least the immediate danger was contained. They trudged back to the barn to check on Duchess and the few other horses. Ariana's legs ached and she shivered from the cold, but she forced herself to keep moving. As they stepped into the barn, Lucas turned to her and pulled off his dripping gloves. "Thank you," he said, voice laced with gratitude and relief. "You really saved me out there. Saved the farm, too. That's our livelihood, those cattle standing amid the flickering lantern light and the smell of damp hay." Ariana's teeth chattered, but she managed a smile. "You've done more for me." His gaze held hers for a long moment, the storm's thunder rolling outside. Then something in his posture softened. He reached out to brush a strand of wet hair from her forehead. "You've got a way of surprising me, Ariana." Her heart did a somersault before she could overthink it. She let the raw surge of emotion guide her. She stepped closer and their eyes locked. The moment hung tension, thick as the storm outside. Finally, Lucas leaned in and she met him halfway in a kiss that was both tender and charged with all the unspoken words between them. For a fleeting instant, Ariana felt like this was where she belonged. Muddy boots, battered barn, and a simple life where each gesture meant something real. Dawn broke on a world cleansed by the storm, the Hayes farm awash in a cool morning light. Ariana woke in her cabin, body aching from the previous night's ordeal. Yet her thoughts were consumed by the memory of that kiss. A secret spark she carried with her like a hidden treasure. She wondered if Lucas felt the same. After changing into dry clothes, she headed to the farmhouse. The smell of coffee greeted her from the kitchen. Nicole was at the table, flipping through a stack of letters with a grim expression. She gave Ariana a small nod, but her gaze was tinged with worry. "More bank notices?" Ariana ventured. Nicole sighed, raking a hand through her hair. "They're not backing off. We have, 2 weeks before the final payment plan is due. After that, we risk foreclosure." Her eyes flicked to Ariana. "The grants have helped, but it's not enough. We need either a large injection of cash or some extremely favorable terms." Ariana swallowed. She knew her own private efforts could solve this problem in a heartbeat, but she hadn't yet told Lucas about her real identity, and the clock was ticking. "Lucas is out checking the fields," Nicole added. "We lost part of the fence line near the creek." She found him about an hour later, hammering a new plank into place where the fence had washed out. The terrain was still muddy, and the crisp morning air stung her cheeks. Ariana approached quietly, fighting the urge to wrap him in her arms, but they hadn't discussed that kiss or what it meant yet. "Need help?" she asked. He turned, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "You might be more useful, grabbing that wire over there." He jerked his head at a coiled roll lying by the fence post. She complied, holding it in place while he stapled it. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes. Then, unable to bear the tension, Ariana spoke up. "About last night." Lucas paused, setting down the hammer. I'm not sorry, he said firmly, turning those deep green eyes on her. I just hope you don't regret it. Her pulse fluttered. I don't regret anything. Something in his stance relaxed. He reached out to tip her chin upward. When I first saw you soaked in the barn doorway, I never imagined we'd be here. But there's something real between us. And if there's anything I've learned from near catastrophes, it's that life's too short to hold back. Ariana felt her chest tighten with conflicting emotions. She thought of the half-truth she was living. If I confess now, will he believe this is still real? Before she could decide on her next words, they heard the rumble of an approaching car. Lucas exchanged a worried look with Ariana before dusting off his hands and heading to the farmhouse driveway. It was a black sedan, shiny and out of place in the country setting. The driver stepped out wearing a suit and introduced himself as Mr. Rowan from the bank. Ariana stiffened. She hung back a little, listening as Rowan informed Lucas of an adjustment to the timeline. They needed a solid repayment plan by the end of next week. 7 days, Lucas's jaw set. Ariana saw the anxiety flash across his features. He managed a curt nod and watched grimly as the banker drove off. Then with a quick glance at Ariana, he strode back to the fence, frustration evident in every line of his body. Ariana felt her heart pound. 7 days, the moment of truth was barreling toward them, and she could no longer delay the inevitable. That evening, Ariana retrieved her laptop from its hiding place under the cabin's bed. With trembling fingers, she connected to the secure network Damon had set up for her months ago. A flurry of emails greeted her. Some from her legal team and others from the Lee Innovations board members who were panicking about the stalled merger. She opened a draft of a statement. She had begun preparing Ariana Lee. Have decided to redirect Lee Innovations resources into sustainable agricultural technology. She halted, recalling how she had once envisioned bridging her tech empire with real-world solutions that benefited communities like Hayes Farm. The synergy made sense: sensor-equipped irrigation systems, predictive weather modeling, and direct farm-to-consumer digital marketplaces. However, she had always been too swamped by corporate politics and investor demands to pursue it fully. Now she realized that these ideas could be a lifeline not just for Hayes Farm, but for countless small farms across the country. Yet to pitch such a pivot, she would need the board's approval, and that meant stepping back into the arena she had fled. I could do it from here, she thought, skimming the documents. If I come clean to Lucas, if I show him that my resources aren't just about writing a check, but about building something real, perhaps he'd understand. But time wasn't on her side. The bank's new deadline was a week away. Ariana penned a quick message to Damon, instructing him to line up some rural development initiatives that Lee Innovations could invest in quietly at first. Next, she typed an urgent directive. Hold off the merger. I will return to finalize the new strategic plan. She hesitated before clicking send because it meant her disappearance was effectively over. The media frenzy would intensify and reporters would dig into every clue about where she had been. Finally, Ariana shut the laptop, exhaling shakily. Her mind buzzed with 1,000 thoughts. She imagined stepping into a boardroom, still smelling faintly of hay, her boots caked with mud from the farm. Would they laugh, or would they see the sincerity in her eyes? The bigger question, though, was whether Lucas would accept the part of her that was Ariana Lee, the billionaire tech mogul. Morning arrived with a sense of quiet resolution. Ariana walked to the farmhouse and found Nicole in the kitchen again, flipping through an old ledger. A yawn escaped her, indicating a restless night. Across from her, Lucas wore an expression of weary concentration. We have to present the bank with something by Friday, he said to Nicole, even if it's half-baked. Ariana set her bag down. I might have a better plan, she said, voice trembling with nerves. But it's a big one. They both looked up. Nicole raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Ariana drew a breath, trying to steady herself. I have connections, she began carefully, high-level ones. And I think I can bring serious investment into Hayes Farm, if you'll let me. Lucas's jaw tightened. Connections, you never mentioned them before. I know, she said softly, but it's time I showed you who I really am. She reached into her bag, pulling out her real phone, the smartphone with her name engraved subtly on the case, and set it on the table. Nicole and Lucas exchanged puzzled, wary looks as Ariana unlocked it. In a series of swipes, she brought up news articles, pictures of her speaking at tech conferences, official statements from Lee Innovations. She scrolled slowly, the headlines glaring: Ariana Lee, tech titan, missing heiress, visionary founder. Lucas's gaze darkened, realization crashing over him. Nicole put a hand to her mouth, eyes wide. I'm Ariana Lee, she said quietly, CEO of Lie Innovations. I left because I needed to see something real. I never meant to lie to you. Her voice faltered. I wanted you to know me without my name or money clouding everything. But now with the deadline, I can't stay silent. For several moments, neither sibling spoke. Outside, a breeze rustled the thin curtains, the only sound in the stifling quiet. When Lucas finally found his voice, it was low and tense. So you're the one behind those mysterious grants and the suits showing up offering us help. Oriana's eyes brimmed with tears. She refused to let fall. Yes. But I did it because I care. Lucas stood abruptly, the chair scraping on the wooden floor. You manipulated everything he said, fist clenching. How are we supposed to trust any of it? Any of this? He gestured between them, referencing not just the farm but their connection. Ariana's chest constricted. She felt the weight of her deception pressing down like a physical force. I know I handled it badly, she began, voice trembling. But my feelings for you, for this place, they're real. I was just afraid you'd see me as some billionaire playing hero. Nicole broke her silence, her tone even, but laced with betrayal. You lied to our faces, watched us struggle, all while secretly pulling strings. That's not exactly honest partnership. Ariana turned to Nicole, desperation in her eyes. I understand, but please believe me. I never wanted you to fail. I only wanted to help without overshadowing your work or your pride. Lucas's gaze flicked between Ariana and the phone on the table. How long? He asked, voice choking with anger. How long did you plan on keeping us in the dark? She swallowed. I don't know. Part of me wanted to come clean the moment I realized how important you'd become to me. But every day that passed, it got harder. Then the bank kept closing in and I panicked. I didn't want you to lose the farm because of my indecision. He let out a scornful laugh. You could have rescued the farm in a heartbeat, and we'd never be the wiser. But you chose to watch us sweat. You manipulated every advantage, grant approvals, that match funding from your shell corporation. You made us think it was good fortune. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. Yes, I did, and I'm sorry. But you have to know, I was trying to preserve the farm on your terms. Lucas closed his eyes, pain evident on his face. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, but the hurt ran deep. I opened my life to you, Ariana. I didn't hold back. Now I find out you're not just a simple traveler. You're the head of a global tech company. Feels like a slap in the face. Nicole stood as well, arms folded protectively. You need to give us time to process this, she said, her eyes flickering with a glimmer of compassion, but overshadowed by wariness. The bank deadline is still looming, but this changes everything. Ariana nodded, biting her lip. I'll do whatever it takes to save the farm, even if it means leaving, she said, voice cracking. I love this place. She hesitated, glancing at Lucas. I love you. Lucas looked away, jaw taut. Don't, he whispered. Don't say that right now. Tears threatened to spill over, but Ariana mustered what was left of her composure. All right, I'll go. I'll give you space, she turned to Nicole, voice trembling. But if you'll let me, I'll finalize the investments in a clear legal way. The farm can be yours under your control. No strings. Nicole nodded slowly, still guarded. Lucas didn't respond. Ariana gathered her phone and laptop, then walked out of the farmhouse on unsteady legs. Reporters had already begun sniffing around the small town after rumors circulated about Ariana Lee's disappearance. She would book a hotel in the nearest city, face the press, and try to salvage both her corporate life and her own shattered heart. As she drove away, the Hayes farm disappeared in the rearview mirror, illuminated by the early morning sun. Memories of the last few weeks rushed through her mind. The laughter, the fresh air, the blossoming romance, and the promise of a life unshackled from corporate demands. Now she had to confront the reality that everything she cherished might be irreparably damaged by her own choices. In the quiet hum of the rental car, Ariana made a vow: if there was any way to bridge these two worlds, her tech empire and the authentic life she'd tasted on the farm, she would find it. Whether Lucas Hayes would ever forgive her was a question that clenched her heart like a vice. But she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't let the farm or Lucas be destroyed by her deception. She would fight for them both if they'd still have her. In the end, Lucas and Ariana's journey shows us it's never too late for honesty, redemption, and building bridges between tradition and innovation. Together, they found common ground where Montana ranching meets cutting-edge technology, a partnership that revitalized their community and redefined what it means to truly succeed. Their story is more than just romance. It's a powerful reminder that real strength comes from forgiveness, humility, and fighting to preserve our way of life. This tale celebrates timeless American ideals: loyalty, resilience, and the courage to trust your heart, no matter your age or background. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Lucas was right to forgive Ariana? Would you have done the same to save your family's heritage? Share your stories and opinions in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation alive.